Hi, Amy.
Hi, Anna. How are you?
Cold.
Yes, I believe you're in. Are you in Toronto?
I am in Toronto and it's very chilly.
Yes, I am also in Toronto. Welcome, everybody, to Barnes& and Noble's Midday Mystery event. I'm so thrilled and honored to be here. My name is Amy Stuart. I am a writer. My most recent novel is The Death at the Party. And I am here to interview and moderate a discussion with the Venerable Anna Porter. For those of you who are not Canadian, I get to introduce you if you don't know her. She is a superstar of Canadian, not just writing, but also publishing. Um, so I'm going to start with a little introduction. So Anna Porter has, I believe, written six novels. Is it
Yes.
six? Six novels, and a vastly varied number of nonfiction books. This sort of depth and breadth of your nonfiction is really quite staggering. It's hard to sort of narrow you into a slot. You've written across a whole variety of topics. So I encourage you to look up Anna Porter's backlist because it's pretty significant. She's also been published in newspapers and magazines. Very significantly, she founded Key Porter Books. So Key Porter Books was a behemoth of Canadian publishing and I think international publishing. She's published books by greats like Farley Mowat, Margaret Atwood, and one of our former prime ministers here in Canada, Jean Chrétien. She's held all kinds of positions and titles on boards and had a significant impact on the Canadian publishing landscape over the course of her career. She's also a member, an officer of the Order of Canada, which for Canadians is a very big deal. She was born in Budapest, Hungary, educated in New Zealand, and has been in Canada for just over 50 years, I believe. And yes, has a lot of honorary degrees at that. So, anything you want to add to that, Anna? I only skimmed the surface. I could spend 15 minutes
Oh,
talking about
that's fine.
everything you've done in your life. But today we are focusing on Anna's most recent novel, a wonderful atmospheric mystery called Gull Island. And I'm super excited to talk about this book because the setting is Georgian Bay, which is a place very close to my heart. So we have a lot to talk about. Let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to give you Gull Island is the kind of book where you cannot have any spoilers. So I'm going to give you a very short primer. This is a psychological suspense novel to end psychological suspense novels. It truly is a mind bender. The main character is Jude, and she is traveling to her family's cottage on Gull Island, which is on Georgian Bay. Georgian Bay is a bay off Lake Huron, which is one of the Great Lakes. And if you've never been up this way, Georgian Bay is as close as you could get to an ocean without it being an ocean. Like it has vast vistas. The water can be dark and choppy and scary and cold. It can whip up some pretty intense storms, as we see in the book. So she gets to the cottage, it's neglected, there are animals everywhere. And suddenly Jude starts to grapple with the past, with she sort of feels like she's seeing things, maybe going a little bit crazy, thinking about her parents and her sister. It's just feels almost like a Joseph Conrad descent into madness vibe. Super compelling story, and a really, truly, if you haven't read it yet, you should because I had a hard time putting it down. Okay, so we'll get back to Gull Island, but let's start. I had some great questions from readers, so I'm going to mix them in with my own. let's start about you as a writer. So you've written many books. Give us the lowdown on your writing. How, when, where do you write? Do you have a routine? Do you write in the mornings, afternoons, evenings, all the time?
Well, I write pretty much anywhere where if I'm given a bit of space and some silence. And when my kids were very little, and they made a lot of noise, it's something I'm sure you're familiar with because I heard earlier on that you have kids. Anyway,
yeah.
they make noise and yeah. So I used to start writing after 11 o'clock when I was pretty sure they would be asleep. But now
At night?
At night, yes. But that was in the early days. Now, really, they're grown up, and except for the small dog whose bark you will sometimes hear when I talk, there is relative quiet, and I write everywhere. I sometimes have a notepad, and I'm standing in the kitchen, pretending I'm cooking dinner, which is burning, and I'm actually writing.
There you go. And there's the little bark from the dog. Okay, that was my next question. Do you have any strange writing habits? So things that you need to have with you when you're writing or you can't have. You said silence. So do you have any sort of quirks as a writer, things that you absolutely have to have or do?
I think it really depends on what I'm writing. For a lot of the nonfiction, it really doesn't matter because I was writing it based on stuff that I found out or researched, and I think research that deep research is a whole different matter from writing something like Gull Island. For Gull Island, I needed to be scared, and it's not something that I actually welcomed. But I was spending quite a bit of time. It was COVID. And I kind of think of it as my COVID novel because a lot of things about COVID were scary. And being distanced from people you wanted to be with was one of those things. And an island and Lake Huron is a perfect place, or any island anywhere is a perfect place to be distant from other people. So I got quite scared on the island where I started writing this book. It was dark and I started writing really at night. I was afraid there was a coming storm, and there are, as you said, it's like the ocean. There are huge waves.
Yeah.
And they destroy your boat and they take away your dock, or vice versa. They destroy you, but they destroy everything. And I was just talking to a friend who has a place very close to where ours is, and last weekend there were 7-foot waves. So coming into shore, you can imagine the destruction that a 7-foot wave gets. So I was scared, and there was thunder and lightning, and the electricity was cut off, and I started thinking about, what if nobody comes? What if I'm here alone? And I was alone at the time, and I was thinking, what if nobody comes? And this is where I'm going to be. And I was listening for noises under the storm, because there's storm and there's thunder and there's lightning. And then I'm hearing other things out there in the dark. And am I imagining this? Is there something out there? You know that feeling?
I do know that feeling. And it's so interesting that you say because I think, just to say, there's a question in the chat about spoilers. There will not be any spoilers. You and I, Anna, are going to promise that we're not going to spoil anything in the book. So yeah, no spoilers. We will keep the plot discussion sort of superficial and more centered on the writing and inspirational elements versus what actually happens in the story. Okay, so that's so interesting. You talk, that sort of jumps to my questions about the book itself. You talk about a COVID book. I had a similar experience. My book was written in COVID as well. And I also think the fear, for me, it was more around motherhood, really seeped into this. The main character is quite afraid in the book. And it's so interesting how that happens. So, I guess one of the obvious questions is, you say the fear itself that you were experiencing at the time seeped into the book. What are some other, we have lots of questions in the Q&A about inspiration. So Georgian Bay is this very atmospheric setting. If those of you who are unfamiliar with it, I would advise even just Google Georgian Bay art, and you'll see the windswept gray, island, rocky. It's so particular and specific and beautiful, and harsh. So aside, just tell us a little bit about that, about the inspiration, what compelled you to write this book about this place?
Well, I think that being on the island by myself during this part of this period under COVID, I was there alone.
And is Gull Island a real place? Like, is this?
We're on an island in Georgian Bay, but it's
okay.
It's not Gull Island.
Not called Gull Island. Okay.
Quarry. For anybody who really cares, it's called Quarry Island, and we don't own the island. There are other people on it, thank God. So because if you're gonna, but I really began to. I've lost some friends recently during, really during COVID, when it was very difficult to go and see people who were not well. And when I say lost, I mean they died. So I began really to think about hauntings and ghosts and then being alone and being dark, in the dark. I began to think that maybe there was a ghost, and then there was a question of, well, if there were a ghost here, would it be a friendly ghost? I mean, some ghosts are friendly and some ghosts are not friendly. And I was thinking, okay, so what kind of, when my kids were young and we bought this house where I'm currently sitting, we believed 100% that we had a ghost in the basement. And the number of us, including one of my small children, insisted she had seen a woman wearing a fluffy pink dressing gown and fluffy pink slippers. Now, a woman wearing that kind of garb is not a scary ghost, right? I mean, if you were to go into your basement, which is where this ghost used to hang out, and you see somebody dressed like this, folding, as she often was, folding washing, you think, okay, this is a very, it's a ghost going about her business and it's okay. And we used to name her things, which I'm not going to mention now, but we did in case she's here. I'm not going to take. But
funny, I was gonna ask you about ghosts, because the opening line of chapter 3 in the book is, "Until now, alone on Gull Island, I thought I hadn't believed in ghosts."
Yes.
So, as a reader, I understood that, again, no spoilers, to be an omen, right? To what, like what's coming. The question of haunting. And so then my obvious question is, do you believe in ghosts? And I'm guessing, I'm hearing that the answer is yes.
Yes, I do now. Yes.
You say
do.
now, like
I didn't know. I didn't always, but I do now, for sure.
Okay.
And
you think there are good ghosts? Because I feel like any ghost is a scary ghost, but
well, some of them are friendly and some of them are not. But luckily, I have a sense when I'm walking in the dark sometimes that there's something behind always my left shoulder. Why is that? Anyway, could be my left shoulder. There's something.
Wow. Does that scare you?
Yeah, it does actually. And because
I imagine.
I've read a lot of ghost stories, and
yes,
a book called Ghost Story. which you may or may not have read, but it's quite a scary story, and I've read a lot of them. And
Yes.
Rebecca, did you ever read Rebecca? No.
No.
Okay. Well, anyway, there are good ghost stories and scary ghost stories, and we're just getting to that season.
Yes, we are very much so. A couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have uh, your main character is Jude, and I read a little bit, about before, like my own experience reading this book, and then a bit about it. She is really uh, referred like unreliable. No, and I'm going to preface that to say I don't actually think she was unreliable. I think that she was lost and losing grip on reality and on what, like, her own thoughts and what was real and what wasn't. Like, so that made her unreliable, but it's not like she was lying to the reader. I think she just herself wasn't grounded in what was real and what wasn't. So just talk a little bit about writing that, because you did you did a very sophisticated job, and then you again, no spoilers, but there's wrapped into that the fact that her mother has dementia, which is a whole other component of memory and memory loss, and the reconfiguration of memory. So do you want to just touch on that? I know that's a very loaded I'm not really even asking a question, but really just her Jude and her memories, and how you sort of approach that as a writer.
Well, I think that to some great extent, the book is about lack of love. She grew up. She was even as a young kid, she didn't get very much love, and I don't want to go into.
No, we won't go into details. That's not a spoiler, but no, we won't go into details. But that's
she didn't get much love, and she didn't see much love around her. I guess, and so to some extent, it's about, the book is also about how that will affect the person, and one of the ways in which it affects Jude is she drinks rather too much. Notice that, but it's defensive drinking. It's also a little bit self-destructive, as as that kind of drinking is self-destructive. She's not drinking because she would enjoy a sip of wine. She's drinking. She's trying
to forget or cope.
Yes, to cope. It's a coping. Right. She's trying to dull her memories and her feelings of lack of love. So I think, that's one of the reasons she is unreliable. She's dealing with things that she feels she should have dealt with already, but she didn't. Her father's been incredibly destructive, really, and she initially she tries to remember it differently and puts it in a somewhat different context. Well, he liked order. He liked things to be useful, to have things to have a function. He didn't like things to be just cluttering or taking up space without any usefulness. So she tries to look at it that way, and then the reality of her memories begin to weigh on her. And of course, her mother was also substantially less than perfect. She's a career woman, for one thing. Aren't we both? As readers? But she doesn't hug. She's not a warm person, and children need to be hugged. So the fact that she's not like that it has also, and she communicates, but not at a level that is comforting.
Right. So So many of our questions here from the questions that people submitted talk about inspiration. So we did talk a little bit about that with the setting and even your character and memory. But let's talk. Okay, so you have an idea. You have written several books, nonfiction and fiction. You have an idea. So a few of the questions we have here are, where do you get, not just for Gull Island, but in general, where do you get your inspiration? And then once you have, a really great idea, really great question here is from Praz, is once you have an idea, how do you decide? Like, how do you know if it's good enough to take into an entire novel form? And then I'm going to make this a multi-parter. And then, once you have that idea, do you then outline? Do you seek out the ending as a way? Like, what's your process from Georgian Bay, Island, memory to like actually sitting down to write and then ultimately finish the book?
That's a hard question.
I know. As I'm answering it, as I'm asking it, I'm like, man, this is a tough question for a writer.
I would love to ask you that question. I really would, because I've read your books. So I'd be very interested in asking that question of you, especially the woman at the party, but never mind that. The Gull Island, I am quite, once I start thinking about a book, or I don't think of it as a book. I think about starting to write something because I'm kind of compelled to write it because it's something I care about.
Okay.
Pretty much everything I've written, including nonfiction, has been really rooted in things that I actually genuinely, often powerfully care about. Mm-hmm. And that's no different from this book. So when I started it, I did not start with an outline or thinking, this is going to go to this place. This is going to somehow. It was more like it will reveal itself rather than I have an outline. I did not have an outline. I had a cast of characters, and I had I had this whole lack of love and thing that really informs the book. And I started writing, and I wrote a couple of chapters before I said, oh, I think this is a book. I think I actually want to find out what happens here. Because everything that happens really was almost organic. It developed. It's not true of all my books, that organic thing, but it certainly was of this one.
That's so interesting that you say, like, so you wrote a couple of chapters and it maybe poured out of you in a way where you're like, this has momentum. I can keep going here.
Yes, that's pretty much it. My last book before this one, it's a book called Deceptions. It started with the idea that so many women are murdered in mysteries. It's usually the dead woman story. That girl, dead woman, even if it's a child, a dead little girl. And I wanted to write about a person who was not like that. And there are no dead women in that book or the one before. So, but it was, so I did have an idea fix or an idea that, but it was something that I wanted to write for a totally different reason. I just wanted to have no dead women, but powerful women who do and accomplish stuff and are not terrified.
I had a very similar in A Death at the Party.
Yes.
There's going to be a dead body, but it's not a woman.
So, Amy, I was so pleased. because I really there was a point in my reading of that book, which is the last of your books that I've read.
It's my most recent, yeah.
It's your most recent one. No, it's not. I've read your still books too, but this, and I love them. But
thank you.
That's why I was so pleased that we were getting together. Even anyway, I was hoping it wouldn't be a woman.
No, I know. I think the idea. People talk about how do you find inspiration, and I think that as you talk about here, sometimes it's a premise or a concept, like you say, no, whether it's no dead women or the idea of memory or this place, you have those things converge. The setting, a very clear setting, this idea of memory, and a lack of love, right? Which is a very powerful, almost theme, right? So that's where you start. Some people start with a character, some people start with a plot, like a very clear plot, a story that they want to write. So it's just interesting to hear about. And I think, like you said, that can be different for every book. Okay, a couple more questions. How long, generally speaking, I know this is the sort of how long is a piece of string question, but roughly how long would it take you to finish a novel like Gull Island?
It took me most of a year to finish, which is really quite short.
Yes, that is short.
It's short, but
that is short.
Yeah, I've taken longer with other books, but this one, it just once I started, once I got past chapter 2, I just kept
had legs.
Yes,
that's a great feeling.
It was a good feeling, and really, and which is not to say that, I mean, the editor was wonderful. She really did, but it's because she drew my attention to stuff that I didn't notice. But I wrote it, for me, very quickly.
I think a lot of people who are, who maybe haven't experienced the writing life from once you enter into this world where you're being published, the magnitude of the editor's role, I think that was really surprising for me, just how they really get in there. Yeah. They're like a midwife, like pulling out the baby. It's quite, they really get their hands dirty. So
they're amazing. And
amazing.
And I used to be an editor.
Yes. And that's what I want to talk about next. So I'm so fascinated by you started Key Porter Books, which is, which, as I mentioned in the introduction, was a huge giant in Canadian publishing for many, many years. So I'm fascinated by that kind of crossover. And I don't know, it probably wasn't a crossover, like you were probably always writing, but if you were known for being a publisher and then you become known for being a writer, to me, that's sort of like the equivalent, you're the doctor becoming the patient, because, so just speak a little bit about them. I'm interested to hear, now that you're primarily a writer, how that changes your perspective about your work as a publisher, or just what that transition was like. And like I said, you sort of were the doctor who became the patient.
Well, it was really, I started writing murder mysteries when I was still in the publishing business. And I know this will sound quite silly, but in fact, my first murder mysteries were really motivated by people I would like to kill. And, a literary agent, for example, in New York, and still very much around. But I really wanted to do it. And some competing book publishers, the odd agent, and a bookseller. So, I enjoyed really devising diabolical ways to do them in. I mean, it's just not nothing simple like a gunshot. No, I researched horrible ways to do people in, and I joined, and I think that it helped me continue with my life in publishing, because I got rid of my sense of having been wronged in some way by writing. I didn't need a psychiatrist. I didn't need to be.
I always say that because I think in my daily life, I think I'm a pretty sunny person, and people will often say, why are you writing this super dark stuff? And I said, like, it's a great way to channel your anxiety, to put it on the page. Yes. And you know what you said, I in A Death at the Party, you have a very regular person who ends up killing somebody. And I always say, I truly believe, you have very rarely a serial killer or something like that. But I truly believe that in the right circumstances, if we were trying to protect ourselves or someone we love, if we were trying to avenge something, or that any one of us is capable of something terrible like murder, if we were pushed to that limit. So clearly, if you have an entire roster of mystery novel ideas based on different people in the publishing industry that you wanted dead, you feel the same way.
Well, I did.
Oh,
and the person who's killed in your book, I think it deserved to be. I mean,
well, I mean, of course, you have to. That's part of it.
No, I don't want to.
I think but you do as a writer. You're always, and I think this is true very much so in Gull Island, even though the approach to the ending is very different from probably your previous books and obviously from my book. The idea is that at the ending, there's going to be some kind of reveal, and we are not going to give it away. But the reader needs to feel at once surprised and yet satisfied, and also, like you believe that it's possible, right? That you've developed enough love for the characters and understanding of the story and the characters to believe that whether something they've done or something that's happened to them is possible. That's great. Okay, so I have a couple of questions here. I just want to say Janine has a great comment in the Q&A. She said that Sue Grafton would lie in bed thinking of ways to kill her husband. So there you go. That's the Alphabet series.
I've read them. I am a Sue Grafton fan.
Yes, Sue Grafton is truly a great. And also, Janine asked about the art behind me. Unfortunately, it's not mine. I'm in a workspace, so I can't tell you about it. But it is quite pretty. Okay, and then we have a question: do both or either of you journal daily? Do you have a journal, Anna?
No, I don't.
No. So I have a book like this that I carry with me everywhere, and it is lists. And actually, my main character in my novel is a lister. So I don't know how many of you are listers, where I'll either list what I did in a day if I'm feeling, sometimes if I get overwhelmed and start to feel like I'm not doing enough, then I will counter that by writing down everything I do in a day. Oh. And I think as a mother in particular, we can really wholeheartily underestimate the work that we do in a day, because some of it you might not even consider work when it's actually is work. So I do that. I do keep lists. I write, and then what I need to do and what I've done, and I find that it's soothing for me. And then in there will be, I also have I have 3 of these on the go at all times. And one of them is for ideas. because I'm at the stage of life where I will have an idea for a book, and if I don't write it down, I'll forget it. I don't want that to happen. You think the next day, what was my idea? And then you can't remember. So, okay, let's talk. I have a couple more little threads I want to address before we wrap up here. So, one is a mystery plot specifically, or thriller mystery plot. So, you've written nonfiction, you've written other novels. So, what's the difference? Because I get asked this question a lot, and I don't know. I find it really difficult to articulate the answer. What is the difference in the approach when you're writing a mystery?
I think when you're writing a mystery, you really have to know. I mean, this is a standard mystery. You have to know, as opposed to a thriller, but you really have to know who done it. You really have to know, because if you don't know, you could run off in all directions and find, as I did with the first mystery I wrote, that absolutely nobody could possibly have done it. And then you have to go. So you really almost have to write it backwards. I think with a thriller, it's completely different. But with a mystery, the structure is really important. And at the very least, in the structure, you have to know who done it. Because then you can hint, you can drop hints everywhere. You can have little bits of things appear, so that the reader who enjoys mysteries, and I'm one, can start puzzling it out. I don't mean in the strict Agatha Christie way, because she cheated. I mean, I'm sorry, Agatha, wherever you are. She cheated. Suddenly, out of the blue, somebody pops up who had not been introduced, and just there is this person. And you go, what? And you're supposed to have thought this person was there all along, which is not always the case. So she cheats. But if you're not going to cheat, you really have to know, what the end is going to be.
Yes.
You know everything, but that you've got to know.
So you said earlier that for Gull Island, you did not really outline. And I don't outline. I am not an outliner. I try. I wish I was an outliner, but I find that if I outline, I never follow it. But I learned the hard way with my first novel, which sounds very similar to your experience, that if you don't know who done it, if you're writing a mystery or a thriller, like any book where there's going to be some big reveal at the end, which mysteries, that's sort of the unifying element of a mystery novel. If you don't know who done it and you start writing, you will have to go back and effectively start over once you figure it out. And so what I always say is I imagine it as pick a city that's far away from you. So let's say Seattle or on the other side of the country, and you need to get there. So, I would point my car west and start driving, and eventually I will get there. If I just point my car west and make sure the sun sets in front of my car every night, I will find my way to Seattle. It would probably be more efficient to use a map, but I don't like maps. I can't use them. I never have. But you have to know that you're going to Seattle, or else you will just drive in circles forever and ever. So that's the way I always describe it with mysteries. You don't need a route or a plan, but you have to know where you're going.
Well, I add one more thing to that, Amy. Just from the other side of this discussion, a publisher. If you want to be published, if you want to get a publisher to be interested in what you're writing, the first thing you really need to do is an outline. You need to write a couple of chapters, and you need an outline. Now, you can change the outline Later, you can change your mind about all kinds of things. You can change the names of the characters, you can change your setting, but you've got to have an outline because the publisher isn't really going to respond to random things. And most publishers are quite allergic to reading an entire novel because it's too much reading and they're busy. They don't want to read your whole book. Couple of chapters and an outline, I'm afraid, is basically that's where your outline comes in, which is
that's tough.
Agree with you.
So that's a very good segue into my last little group of questions. So we have some people who have asked, you are an excellent person, really probably the person to ask these questions. What would you suggest to someone who is starting out in writing, in terms of their path to publication? Is there any kind of advice that you can give to an aspiring writer?
Well, yes, I suppose. Let me think about it. But the first thing is, don't wait until you can sit down and write. You can stand up and write. You can walk and write. You can basically you just get on with it. It's really as basic as that. Because a lot of people plan to write and they tell you they're going to write and they've been waiting until they retire and then they're going to write. But, just get on with writing. The second thing is if you're going to try and sell whatever it is, you need a kind of a brief description, like maybe a short paragraph of what it is, and then the aforementioned couple of chapters and an outline, and then it really helps to get somebody who will introduce you to a publisher or an agent. Now, where I disagree with my many colleagues in the publishing business is that they really prefer you to send your package of what I've just described to one publisher at a time and wait for response. And my view is you could die before you get publisher 5, you could be dead. So don't do it. Pick people who don't meet each other for drinks and coffee. So if you're approaching one of the major houses in New York City, you could approach easily another major houses. They're competitors. They're not going to discuss your book. Easy. If you're trying to get published by a small press in a small town, not New York City, there's a pretty good chance that the two publishers in your city are going to be talking to each other. And it's not impossible that they'll get miffed if you've submitted to both. But otherwise, I'd say submit to 4 or 5 of them and see who responds.
I think that's really fantastic advice. And I mean, especially the part at the beginning about writing. I mean, I think that often you get questions as a writer, what's the path to publication? And it's sort of it sounds like a really obvious thing to say, well, writing. Place to start. But you'll have, it's sort of like saying I want to run a marathon, but you don't get up in the morning and run at all. Or people have very clear very narrow parameters. Well, I can only write if it's quiet, and I have to go to the library, and I can only write in the morning. And I really believe that the difference, what sets people apart in the long run is that ability, is building up that muscle of being able to write in more and more places under more and more conditions and writing. And actually, we have a question here. How many words a day do you typically write? I can say that for me, that varies hugely. Some days I'll write 100. Some days I'll write nothing. Some days I'll write 2,000 or 3,000. That's really rare. Really rare, but it does happen. But I think what's changed for me over my career is that I think at the beginning I was like, I need quiet and I need to be sitting and I need to be doing this. And by the end, like once you're under a deadline, I mean, I could write with a jackhammer going next to me because I have no choice.
Right.
So tell me how many words on average would you write in a sitting?
I don't have an average count. Same as you. Some days I write a lot, and some days I don't touch it at all. And some days I write, or I'm really dealing with what I'm writing by walking my dog. My dog is inspirational. As since you've read my Gull Island, you know that I love dogs. And this particular dog is wonderful for, just she inspires me a lot. She's cuddly and cute and she's lovely. Anyway, we walk and I think, and but let me just tell you this funny story. Margaret Atwood sitting at a dinner party, next to a man, and
I think I know the story. Yeah. Go tell it. It's a great story. Yes.
He says, "Oh, and Miss Atwood, what do you do?" "Well, I write." And he says, "Well, what do you do?" And he says, "Well, I'm a therapist. I'm a brain surgeon. Actually, is what I really am. I'm a brain surgeon." And she says, "That's great." And he says, "Well, what a coincidence. When I retire, I'm going to be a writer." And she says, "Wow, now that is a coincidence because when I retire, I'm going to be a brain surgeon."
I do know that story because I studied Margaret Atwood in school, as pretty much every Canadian for the past 50 years has done. And that is, that is such a great take on sort of the idea, I do believe that anybody can write, but there's a big difference between being able to do it and committing to it as an art and a practice and really a trade, like something that you do every day, or not every day, but often enough that you get better at it, whether you take courses or whatever it is that you need to do to sort of hone your craft.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's I think, my advice to aspiring writers is very similar to Anna's. You got to write and then learn about the industry, learn about who the agents in the industry who are representing the kind of work you're writing. On social media, follow agents, publishers, publicists, anyone who's in the industry, because then you'll sort of organically, as you're writing, build up a sense of what the industry is like, what they're looking for, what's getting published, what the holes are, what's missing. And when the time comes to submit, you'll be ready.
And submit to publish the kind of stuff you're writing.
Yes, exactly.
One of the things that you find, sitting in the publisher's chair is you have a reputation of publishing a lot of nonfiction books, and you get inundated with science fiction and mysteries, which you don't publish. So make sure you submit to publishers who actually publish in the area in which you are writing, because a lot of people, the best way to do that is spend a lot of time in bookstores. I love bookstores.
Yes, absolutely. So last question. First of all, we have a comment here from Paula. She said she's very much looking forward to reading your books. So my last question for you is, what are you reading right now?
Oh my. Well,
are you a more than one book at a time kind of person?
That's really, yes. I am more. I've got about 6 books that I'm reading, and it's one of the ones that I've read recently and actually couldn't put down is a book called The Whistling. Have you read Whistling?
No, I'm going to write that down.
It's a scary psychological thriller.
Do you remember the author's name?
No, but I've got the book right here.
She's going to switch off screen for a quick second.
Sorry, I'm right here. Here is.
Okay, move it over so it's in front of you so we can see it. Just you tell us the author, because it's buzzed out. We can't see it.
Rebecca Netley.
Okay, Rebecca Netley. There we go, everybody. Rebecca Netley. That is Anna Porter's.
It's Ronald Mulvey, Come With Me.
Come with me. And great. Two
And
great book
I want to tell you
recommendations.
quickly about books on islands. I've just recently written something for crime writers. You probably
Yes, I
crime readers,
know.
crime readers.
Yes,
I did
yes.
a whole series of books I have really enjoyed that are set on islands. And
Great.
those of you who get, and Linwood Barclay was one of them, and very, very recent book called Look Both Ways.
Oh, I know. I love
And
Linwood
it's a
Barclay.
terrific book. And then J.T. Ellison, do you read J.T. Ellison?
Yes.
Her Dark Lies, have you read that one? Well, I
No.
recommend it. And I am a huge fan of Adrian McKinty.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got an Adrian McKinty I'm reading now, but the book I wrote about is called, oddly enough, The Island. And
Wonderful.
McKinty's Irish. Oh, and he's really got, he's just got wonderful style. And I just, as you do, Amy, I mean, it's one of the pleasures of reading someone like you
Yes, it is.
is
Thank you.
that you write so well, and it's such fun to just sink into, your paragraphs and your descriptions. And
Thank you. Well, on the chat right now, our producer Harry is putting links to the books that, and maybe Anna, maybe on your Twitter you can share a link to that
can I?
crime readers
Yes.
that you've, because we are
yes
just crime readers. We are just about out of time.
Okay.
So I just want to say, Anna, truly, I have admired you for very long, and this has been a very long time. This has been a true honor and pleasure
Thank you.
to speak with you.
And I'm a fan of yours, so
thank you.
it's good.
Thank you.
I've read all your books.
Thank you. And if you haven't already, pick up Gull Island by Anna Porter. Truly an excellent psychological thriller. Thank you so much to Barnes and Noble for hosting us and allowing us to have this conversation, answer some great participant questions, and have a great Monday.
Thank you. Thank
Bye,
you.
Anna.
Bye, Amy.
Bye, everyone.